Hello, and welcome to Of the People, our season finale, year 2. We have a special show for you tonight. We have 2 different panels coming on. Our first panel is New York Times, Wall Street Journal bestselling author, speaker, Chris-Widener, speaker and former COO of the Jewish Federation of Philadelphia, Steve Rosenberg, and Dr. Lori Fineman, founder of Florida's East Coast Voice and former president of Boca JCC. Stay with us for the main show. But now, a new paradigm. And that's really what we're seeing. We need to step back from the Israel-Iran conflict and understand what we're really witnessing, which is a seismic shift in the Middle East. I've said it till I'm blue in the face that we needed to cut the head off the snake before anything would change in the Middle East. And okay, maybe we didn't cut the head off the snake, but they're certainly defanged. And there's a new paradigm that's now taking shape right before our eyes. Remember, look, for decades, the Middle East has been shackled by terror networks, proxies, wars, and the looming threat of a nuclear Iran. And in a matter of 12 days, count them, folks, 12 days, that world collapsed, and Israel strikes were nothing short of devastating. And U.S. bunker buster bombing, say that 3 times fast, bunker buster bombing of the nuclear sites was really the exclamation point. But this wasn't just a military operation, it was a regional reset. And the decade-long fantasy that Iran had that one day it would be able to hold the world hostage with nuclear weapons, over. But just as critical as to what we're seeing is what we're not seeing. Hamas did not rise to Iran's defense. Hezbollah did not ignite a regional war. And when the moment came, these so-called proxies or frontline warriors for Iran, silent, already taken out by Israel. And let's not forget all the money and weapons and political capital that Iran poured into these terror groups for years. And it's clear, because Tehran isn't stupid, they now understand that Hamas and Hezbollah have outlived their usefulness. So don't be surprised if they start cutting them loose. And while we're on the topic, let's not forget there are still hostages in Gaza that need to come home. By last count, there are 50. IDF estimates maybe half are alive, but it doesn't matter. The hostages need to come home. We need not to forget about them, and they need to come home now. Iran understands that this is a losing battle to defend these pawns, so there's no reason for the hostages to not come home. But the bigger picture in all of this is that ceasefire that's now taking place. It really signals something bigger, because it's not just a temporary pause. It's the beginning of a realignment. We are going to see very, very soon several other countries stepping up and stepping forward to make peace with Israel, because the Arab countries know that Israel is not really the enemy. They're really a reliable partner. They're part of the solution, not the problem. Stability and security and economic growth in the Middle East goes through Israel. And the linchpin to all of this is Saudi Arabia. They are the keystone. And peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel will remake the Middle East almost overnight, and would most certainly trigger a cascade of other countries wanting to do deals and redraw alliances. It would be, through the Abraham Accords, of course, the death blow to an old order that survived by keeping Israel on the outside. All that's about to change. The map is changing. The balance of power is shifting. And a new Middle East, one built on strength, stability, and peace, is finally, potentially, within reach. And that is the monologue on our season finale 2-hour special. Ericka, come in and save my rear end. Thank you, Ericka.
There is no saving. That was probably your best monologue yet, Robert. That was really good.
Save the best for last. Well, it's from the heart. I am beyond excited. First of all, we made it 2 years. So are we like over 100 episodes now?
I would imagine so. We've been pretty consistent. If we've missed a week, it's been one.
Well, like we started April 2 years ago. So it's got to be, I think we're over like 100. But I am excited by our guests, both panels, but I want to introduce the first panel.
Yes.
Let's bring them in. We have Chris-Widener, New York Times, Wall Street Journal bestselling author, leading motivationalist, and a minister. We have Steve Rosenberg, author, speaker, principal at GSD, former chief operating officer of Federation of Philadelphia. And Dr. Lori Fineman, psychologist, founder of Florida's East Coast Voice, and former president of the Boca Jewish Community Center. No small feat. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on for our 2-hour special.
Thanks for having us.
Everyone's saying, okay, so let's jump in because you guys are so talkative tonight. I see I've got a lot of work to do just to pull you guys out of this. Okay,
they're just trying to be respectful, and give everybody time. Wait 5 minutes.
Week.
Yeah, wait 5 minutes and they'll be talking all over.
An exhausting week. It's Tuesday. How can it be an exhausting week?
Have you seen everything on the news?
Got it. So let's talk about that. So there's a ceasefire. There's no ceasefire. There's missiles fired. So Steve, I got a question for you because I know you're wired in on this stuff. What's the possibility that Iran, because there was a ceasefire and then Iran launched the missiles and Israel was going to retaliate and they didn't. We'll get into all that. What's the possibility that with the decimation of the leadership that Iran doesn't have control of their military anymore? That maybe it was a rogue strike.
I think there's a possibility that anything's going on in Iran right now, but I think that it's pretty safe to presume that Khomeini is still in charge and that the IRGC is still relatively intact. If you listen to all the experts out there, one of the things that Trump really doesn't want right now and the world doesn't want is regime change. They are not actually ready for regime change in Iran. They're not stable yet. That may come at some point, but not today. We have to get Iran back up on its feet. And I'm not really worried. I know a lot of people are. I'm not worried. And you said in your monologue that we didn't really cut the head of the snake off. And you're right. The head is still there, but the head is really, really woozy. And it's been hammered pretty hard. And I'm grateful that the Chinese stayed on the sidelines and obviously Russia stayed on the sidelines. So the world is a much better place today than it was 13 days ago.
I agree. It still occurs to me that maybe they don't have control, and that's the real risk, right? So now supposedly, and at some point I want to pull up like something like Drudge Report because, when I went to school, I read a political history book written by the Soviet Union, and you would think it was a different history, right? So I guess it's who's telling the story. And you go to certain outlets, whether it's CNN or Drudge now, and you see it, and then you read other outlets that I think are a little more objective, and you just go, these guys are telling different stories. But Chris, I want to go to you in all of this, and I want to sort of touch base on the ministerial side of Chris-Widener, right? And most people don't know you're a minister.
I forgot my collar tonight, so
you have a collar. It's just a V-neck. It's okay. So how do you reach people whose religion is, I would call it a death cult, right? I mean, you can't really open them up to, because to me it's one God, right? I don't care whether it's like, the God of, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? The God of the Jews, God of the Christians, and even the God of the Muslims, right? I'll give them that. It's the same God. There's only one. Yet, how do you reach someone? You're so good at reaching people. And we're not sending you over to Iran to do that, but I just, for someone who has such insight and such depth.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, it is definitely a death cult. And my personal belief is that the God of Islam is not the God of Christianity and Judaism. I think
explain that to me.
Well, I think what they believe to be true about God is not accurate of God. And so they're talking about a different God. So if I say to you, do you know John Smith? And you say, oh, I love John Smith. He's amazing. He's fantastic. And we start talking about John Smith and I go, yeah, I can't believe, he just got that new position at the insurance company. And you go, oh, wait a minute. The John Smith I know, he's a plumber. You can call something the same and it's not necessarily the same. And that's how I view when you look at the history of Islam, all that, one of the things I try to tell people, and I had to educate one of my friends who is a network news star. And after October 7th, they were having a discussion on their show. And I reached out and I said, you guys are missing the whole boat. Like there's no talking to these folks. There's no reforming these folks without an absolute cutting off of who they are and where they come from and getting into the mainstream of humanity. And I told her, I said, you guys are talking about the geopolitical, you're talking about the political, you're talking about the economic, you're missing the entire foundation of this whole thing. And she said, well, what's that? And I said, it's Isaac and Ishmael. And she said, who's Isaac and Ishmael?
Wow.
That's my
Wow.
point. You don't understand that this
Right.
is thousands and thousands of years old, where God said that there will be enmity between the two forever.
Mm.
And so when I look at it from a biblical perspective, both, Old Testament, New Testament, I look at it as this is the way it is. This is their nature. And I really believe that what we have to do is we have to expose them to the truth. I believe people are capable of change. I believe that people are capable of renouncing things. But when you look at the history of, Islam, there's a lot of crazy stuff that even a lot of Muslims don't know. I do believe there's lots of great, nice, kind Muslim people. I just don't think they know what Islam really teaches. And so I think when you try to reach out, I would say that you try to talk about values, human values, and you try to pull them off of Muslim dogma. Once you can get them off of Muslim dogma, then you can actually talk about human values that the rest of the world lives by. And, I think the average person just doesn't, outside of Islam, doesn't look at what they've done as being something that normal, rational human beings do. I also think one last thing, excuse me, we are, as Western culture, we are very much tangible, right? It doesn't exist unless you can pour it in a beaker. That's how you determine what is real and what isn't real. Well, the reality is that there is a spiritual world as well. And in the spiritual world, there is good forces and there are evil forces. And they hold hostage groups of people and individuals. And so one of the things that I look at is we have to see the spiritual world of what's going on. And I believe that all of the radical Islam are held hostage, not just by tangible physical forces, but by spiritual forces. And so helping them come to spiritual conversion, I think, is the most important thing.
No, interesting. So, that leads me, Dr. Fineman. So we're gonna pull you in on your psychological basis. Is what I've always questioned, and there are still hostages, obviously, in Gaza, but even more, I think, concerning is the cycle of violence, right? Because they train their kids young, right? You work in that world, that's your world, right? So how do you break that cycle? Because so Chris was talking about being captive of sort of a spiritual evil, right? I think, and doesn't let you go. But there's also the physical side or the emotional side. I mean, you see young children in Gaza that are death to Israel, indoctrinated.
Yeah.
Can you undo? Let's leave the spiritual part to the side. But
it's very difficult to unindoctrinate, I guess is the word, unindoctrinate people. You have to remove them from the source, right? And unfortunately, we're seeing it here in America. If you start young and you infiltrate it into everything that they know and everything that they see and everything that they believe, and they're reinforced for it over and over and over again, it's a very hard thing to break. They don't even know that what they're doing is, I'm going to use the word, we can use pathological, sadistic, horrific. They don't know. That's all they know. And it's not until you can get them out of that environment. And oftentimes it's not willingly, but you do hear of some people who have gotten themselves and extricated themselves out of, Hamas, right? Hamas's son, the founder of Hamas's son, who's all over social media talking about how he got out and how now he can see it clearly. You can't see it. When you're in the vortex, you can't see it, so to speak.
Can I add on to
I
that
want to
real
tell you a
quick?
story, real quick story.
Wow, everyone just jumped.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Hold on.
Talk about, everybody
Stephen,
talks about beating Hamas. Hamas is an ideology. So even if the soldiers that are there now are eradicated, what Laura just hit upon is crucial because they're training 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. So Hamas isn't going away. Hezbollah isn't going away. The Muslim Brotherhood, Islamic Jihad, this isn't going away. These are ideologies. These are not governmental agencies that are just going to disappear because some missiles are gone. And even if we did take out Iran's nuclear warheads, they're going to find new scientists who want to do this. And I want to say one other thing. We all talk about the tunnels from the north and the south into Israel. The bad guys built tunnels into America too, and they're called schools. And it's not just Middle Eastern children who are being indoctrinated. There are kids in this country who have this illiberal ideology permeating in K through 12 schools that have taken over. Look out your windows, look at SJP, look at Within Our Lifetime, look at Sammy Dune. These are Americans, or, indoctrinated Americans. And if we do not, everybody talks about colleges and worried about colleges. If we do not fix K through 12 in this country, the next 2 and 3 generations, I'm not worried about the Middle East. I'm worried about what's going on domestically.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to tell you a quick little story, and this goes to something that the good doctor said. Part of the problem is people in these countries don't even know what goes on outside the world. And I'll tell you, I've spoken in Egypt twice. Both were before the Muslim Brotherhood. It was I think Hosni Mubarak was the president. So basically a secular nation. With primarily Muslims and then Coptic Christians and then some Jews there. And I gave a speech to this super high-tech company. I showed up. These people were all college graduates. There were 400 of them, all graduates of college, university. Some had their doctorates, and they were business suits. The men were in business suits. The women were in beautiful dresses. They wore scarves, but they were, beautiful scarves, whatever, not like the thing where you can only see your eyes out or whatever. But back then, my biggest book was called The Angel Inside, and it was about the creation of the David. It's a fictional story about the creation of the David when Michelangelo created the statue of the David. And when I got to that part, here I am talking to 400 college-educated professional Egyptians. And I said, in a secular society, and I said, so how many of you have actually ever seen the David? The David, the greatest statue ever created, the David, it's in Italy. I don't mean that you've been there. I mean, can you picture it in your mind? They looked at me like I was talking French.
Wow.
And then I panicked. I went, oh my gosh, I'm in a room with 400 Muslims talking about the King of the Jews. but what I came away from that thinking, they don't even know anything about the Renaissance, about art, about history, about Italy, about any of this stuff. So it made me think, what is just completely cut out of anything? So they're put into this shell where there's no outside information.
Wow.
And this was then you take it from there to Iran or someplace like that where they're really on lockdown religiously. These folks don't even know what's going on in the world, the vast majority of these people.
That is scary to think about. Like it really does sound like, kids, these cults where you hear about kids that have been like locked away in their house for their whole life and they've never met people before.
Yeah.
That is crazy to me.
Yeah.
That is scary.
So again, it comes back to how do you reach that, right? Look, you all know me well, right? In full disclosure to our listeners, right? You've been on the show before. We've worked on other projects before. I am not a kumbaya guy. It's not. No one would ever describe me that way. But I am concerned because I would argue we're losing. Notwithstanding everything going on with Iran, the fact that I think they've been, for the time being, neutralized. I think there's the opportunity, as I said in the monologue, that it's going to. There's a new paradigm taking place in the Middle East. And I believe that sincerely, but there's still the question of hearts and minds, not just hearts and minds, Steve, as you're talking about in this country, which is, pernicious enough. Mm-hmm. But Chris, to your point, right, culturally, what you're talking about is they are in this. I mean, if we think we're in an echo chamber in this country, they're in an echo chamber with, like, I don't know, bomb-proof barriers, nuclear bomb-proof barriers, and can't get out of it. And Steve, you must see some of that even in Philadelphia. We were having a conversation before the show started about Philadelphia and the No Kings thing in Ground Zero. But you work on the ground with that. Are they reachable? I mean, how do you, someone in the Middle East, if someone dropped someone from the Middle East, on your doorstep, how do you reach them? Because they're too far gone.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Before you answer, I just have to give you guys a heads up. It is bright and sunny outside, and there is very loud thunder going off overhead. So if for some reason we lose the show for a second, it will come back on eventually. It's just a summer storm in Texas.
Thank
So
you.
if we've insulted Hashem, it means the show is going down. Okay.
No, I want to
So-
warn you guys. It'll come
Thank
right
you.
back on, but just a warning. So, Steve, how do
yeah.
you reach people?
So I think there's two answers to that. And I'm going to tell you a quick, because Chris inspired me, I'm going to tell you a quick story. I've been recently doing some work with a woman who's the head of the Hindu American Foundation. And many people don't know that the plight of the Hindus in this country is on par with the Jews. They are crapped on, they are discriminated against, they have all the same issues that the Jews have. They have it even worse in some cases because they look a certain way.
Yeah.
Like I can walk down the street and nobody knows who I am because I'm not distinctively anything other than bald and ugly. Okay. So, but Hindus look a certain way. And as I was talking to her, I actually felt bad because I never thought about the Hindu community. I'm not against the Hindus. I'm certainly not anti-Hindu. I just don't think of them because I don't have a lot of them in my life. And I believe strongly that most people in this country are not anti-Jew. They are not anti-Israel. They don't think about it because since for the last 76 years or however long news has been on TV, there has been a conflict in the Middle East. So people are sick and tired of hearing about it. They tune out because like, there they go again. And they're not nuanced. They don't understand the depths of what's going on. And they just don't, it's not that they just don't care. They don't know Jews. They don't know Arabs. And they don't, it's not an issue for them. That's number one. Number two is
proximity.
You're missing the most important factor, right? What Chris said was right. What Lori said was right. But there are actual people, the funders of domestic terrorism here, who aren't interested in right or wrong, truth or false. They are pitching a certain narrative that is going to go forward no matter what. You have Mahmoud Khalil, who should even be in this country, should have been deported, and eventually will be when it gets to the Supreme Court. But he's out now on his first day out, was campaigning and protesting against Jews in Israel. And today said that, you know, the Jewish terror is because the U.S. has funded Israel for all these years. So this is a guy, he knows the truth. He's not stupid. He knows what's going on, but he's being paid to say what he's being paid to say.
That's it right
All these
there.
people are being paid. They don't care. You're talking about truth and not truth. They know the truth. They don't give a crap about the truth. They're pushing a certain narrative, which plays well on TV. Whether I don't care, by the way, if you watch CNN or Fox, it doesn't matter. Nothing is true on TV. Nothing.
No, Steve, actually, you are absolutely correct. It is about the money. And I'm going to argue that many of them don't actually even know. They are literally showing up, being told what to say, and they're getting paid for it. And if you really dissect it and you ask them the questions of what's going on there or who's, you know, the most LGBTQ accepting in the entire country, you're literally getting responses that blow your mind. It's never anybody saying Israel, which is actually the most LGBTQ open and welcoming city, and Israel's the most welcoming country. You're not getting that. You're getting Palestine. Okay, well, let's check the data there. You're getting some crazy answers for these people that are protesting. They have no clue. They don't know which river. They don't know which sea. They don't know what's been going on there. You know, you ask them who's like the biggest funder of terrorism, and they say the United States. I mean, they literally have no idea. And by the way, this is coming off of graduates at universities in our country.
Yeah.
We should be ashamed of ourselves. But so I'm just arguing the part that, yes, I'd like to believe some of them know what they're talking about, and they probably do, but most of them have no clue. They're getting paid, and it's a very K through college. They're susceptible, right? Imprinting happens early. And when you get into that adolescent years,
they can choose their gender though. Wait.
But it's those same people that are choosing their gender that are lost, right? And what's the first thing that they're looking for? They're looking for acceptance and connection, right?
Yep.
And here's these people who are saying, hey, come. You'll fit right in here. There's a lot of people who are doing this, and we're going to pay you to do it.
Okay, here's the deal. This is what I don't get. Okay, back in my day,
That wasn't so long ago.
I was
Wait,
going to say, I don't
back
think
in
that was-
Steve's day, Chris's
Hey,
day, and Robert's day was a long time ago.
I'm creeping
Hey,
up
speak
on
for yourself,
50.
old man.
Okay, I am
Oh, don't
creeping
hurt
up on
yourself
50.
there,
I am
Ericka.
grown. Okay, I
Don't
am
hurt yourself
grown.
creeping up there.
But
Back in your day. Wait, let's start over. Back in your day.
shit, what the heck was I saying? Oh,
I
we
don't
were
know.
just freaks and weirdos. You know, I was like, I wasn't a jock. I wasn't like, you know, a this or, you know, I wasn't like a goth kid. I was just like, you know, one of the kids who was like kind of like just a weirdo. And you know what? We just went off and were like weirdos together and like walked around in the woods and like, you know, took our parents' car out at night like normal teenagers. Like we didn't have to lop off our freaking genitals. I'm sorry. Well, how we were supposed to be talking about Israel and Iran, but
That's
I don't-
okay. We'll roll with this. That's
what
okay.
happened? What happened? Like, Lori, do you know when, like, at what point you couldn't just be like a freak and a weirdo? You had to start like doing weird stuff, like
Well,
mutilating your body.
Look, I'm going to argue that the technology has given us access to so much,
Yeah.
and you didn't realize back in the day that there were other people outside of your little square radius, right? And you had a few people and that was it. But once you have this technology and you have access not only to social media, but just the internet in general, and you can start Googling things and asking things, and some of that stuff is so biased that you're getting perspectives on. And now you have social media and you're seeing what everybody else is doing and you're comparing yourselves. And now you're starting to get information. And by the way, then you have the social media comparing and seeing what you're like, the FOMO, what you're missing out on, right?
Oh my God, I'm
But
dizzy.
then,
Listen to
wait,
you.
but then you're getting it funneled in a certain way through the algorithm. So you're then only seeing one perspective regurgitated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. You don't even know the other side exists. You don't even know what's going on. So I'm blaming it on that. I mean, there could be other theories out there, but I am blaming it on that. Not solely.
Other theories are wrong.
You
Other
and cycling back a little bit to
it's everything you guys talk about.
Back to the question of how do you win people? I just remembered this. I really believe that the hope of Iran is the people of Iran.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you look at those pictures from the 70s, you know, when the Shah was there before the religious takeover and Sharia law and all that kind of stuff, they were normal. They were as Western as we were. And I think there's a lot of people that do not like what's going on. They're held hostage by a religious regime. And I'll tell you, I gave a virtual speech to 7,000 Iranis about probably 5 years ago. And they were in Tehran. And I was in Scottsdale at our house, and I was doing this virtual speech. And I did my regular sales speech. You know, it was for a company. And I did my regular sales speech and that kind of stuff. But I said, before I go, and they had it set up so that they could see me on the big screen, but they had the computer turned around so I could see the audience. And I said, before we go, I want to say something as an American. I know that your government and our government, your leaders and our leaders, there's lots of fighting. There's differences in political opinions and all those kinds of things. Let's forget that for a moment. I know that you who are sitting in those chairs today, you want the same thing I do. You want to find love. You want to have a great marriage. You want your children to be healthy and to grow up and be productive members of society. You want to live a long, healthy life. You want to be surrounded by friends. And I basically went on like that for about a minute and just kind of, I tried to make the connection between the people there who are being held hostage and people in America who are not being held hostage, and that we want the same things. Humanity at its basic level wants the same things. And I kid you not, they gave me a 2-minute standing ovation for a virtual speech. And I do not believe it was for my speech. I believe that it was because I embrace them as humans, as people who don't believe what their leaders believe, but they're held hostage, literally at gunpoint, or the threat of terror, being dragged off and never being seen by their families again. So I think to the degree that we can connect, and I'm sure that there's some sort of American government agency that's broadcasting into Iran or, you know, something like that. But I think that the hope for Iran is the average normal person to rise up and to band together and overthrow the system.
Can I just say one thing to that, Robert? And I love
Of
that.
course.
Hearing from Chris, but the takeover by the Ayatollah was 45 years ago. So
Yeah.
if you are 45 and under, this is all you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm not
That's all you've
sure
known.
that they are upset, because the
Yeah.
one thing that I have not seen over the past 12 days is actual protests in the street. I've seen some cheering of bombing, alleged. I mean, I don't know if it's real cheering or not, but when you have regime change, or when you have people that want to, change their government, you see protests in the street, you see fights. We saw none of that for the last 12 days.
Well, that's
Not
because
one
they
thing.
kill them if they go out on the streets. We
Well,
can go out in the
maybe.
streets
The
and do all
IRC
sorts of
fine.
hairy-carry, but
if you
the
want-
people
if
of
you want
Iran can't
political
do that.
change, you protest. It has happened in every regime ever. People have not been afraid to die. That is what they fight for.
Yeah.
That's what's going
Yeah.
on in Ukraine. And if you want real regime change, you're not afraid. So I don't disagree with Chris. I'm just not sure, because it's been 45 years that these
That's a
people
great
have
point.
lived with this scum.
Yeah.
Well, and
Well,
I'll
then,
throw one other point into this,
Cool.
which is, I'm sort of a pseudo historian, and every revolution always turns on, does the military turn against the regime?
Yeah.
Right, because you can have protests in the streets. Let's look at 1789, right? French Revolution, right? But that's just one example. Until the military turns against the regime, the genesis of it, if I can, use the word, is the people protesting.
Yeah.
But the seminal moment is, does the military turn against the government or the leadership, right? Because without that, they may not be afraid of dying in the streets, because
Well,
that's
did you
what they're
guys
going to
see this?
do.
Did you see the president of Iran? And I was trying
Yeah.
to read it right.
Yes.
He came out and said,
Yes.
the religious leaders are on their way out. It's crumbling. They're going to flee the country. I actually was sitting there thinking, is this guy going to make it home tonight? Like, are they just going to take this guy out and shoot him in the street, or what?
Maybe.
For him to get up there and say that, and obviously he's boots on the ground, so he knows exactly what's going on. So I take a little bit of hope in that.
Yeah, and
What else? Another thing we should take some hope in is Israel Appreciation Day, our sponsor. So why don't we take a oh wow, y'all, that is like close thunder, like is right. I don't know if you can hear that.
we do, Ericka, we do not hear the thunder.
Okay, I'm gonna get over it.
Sounds like a Jackson Brown song, though, by the way.
We
Just
appreciate
throw
you
that in there.
guys for watching. Go to IsraelAppreciationDay.com, get your merch, donate, see how you can participate. Let's hear from our sponsor.
Hello, and thank you for being here. This is the first ever Israel Appreciation Day.
I believe in the words of Israel's first leader, David Ben-Gurion, who said, "One does not write history, one makes history."
The history of the Jewish people is one of rising and flourishing, despite thousands of years of being attacked, exiled, and scapegoated.
And I'm honored to join all of you in celebrating the first annual Israel Appreciation Day. And there are many reasons to appreciate Israel. It's one of America's closest allies in the world. It's a safe haven for persecuted people, and it's a wellspring of innovation.
The land of Israel was given to the Jewish people, not by the United Nations, but by God himself.
Well, no one wants to fight. I'd love not to have this weapon, to be in a bulletproof vest, to serve in the IDF.
We cannot allow the worst instincts in our society to win. We must stand proud, and we must stand tall.
Theodor Herzl believed the only solution was for the Jews of Europe to free themselves. And where else do the Jewish people belong than in their homeland in Judea?
This is the Jewish moment, when the Jewish people stands for life over death and shows the lost and confused West how to survive.
From the Chalutzim, the pioneers, the original and early inhabitants of the land, even before the official creation of the State of Israel in 1948.
In my mind, one does not have to be Jewish to support Israel in their battle against the evil that is Hamas. One only has to be human.
Our Jewish community is stronger than ever.
And Israel's two things. It's not just a place, it's also a people.
We're only a generation away from the Holocaust. And understanding, yes, it could happen again. My daughter came home and said, is there going to be another Holocaust?
I couldn't live with myself if I didn't stand with Israel and the Jewish people at this moment in time when they most need us.
A free press during the Israel-Hamas conflict has provided real-time updates on terror attacks. And if we don't learn from those conflicts and wars, we're doomed to repeat the same mistake.
And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to come out and be a voice of one sometimes. What did you do professionally prior to October 7th?
It is your duty as a Jew to shine the light. Go on to social media.
Why would you flourish under persecution? And the answer is that's our nature. That's always been our nature. When our enemies terrorize us and they come after us, what you see is a direct correlation to innovation.
The nation of Israel lives.
Ladies and gentlemen, our sponsor, Israel Appreciation Day.
And we are back with Chris Widener, Steve Rosenberg, and Dr. Gloria Fineman. And Chris, you didn't get the memo to wear your blue suit. Your blue suit.
I know. I saw that, and I thought, boy, we got to get our suits different next time.
Yeah. Well, we'll message you. So I want to broaden this conversation, but stay in international. So we drop. I don't know. I've heard 6 bunker buster bombs, 12 and 14. I don't know the exact number, but Steve, you probably do. But here's the real question: what do you think China's reaction is? Because the truth is, right? The truth is, Iran is enemy number 2. Let's not forget that really the man behind the curtain is enemy number 1 is China. Is it not, Steve? And I mean, do you think there's any chance they're going into Iran in the next 3 years? I'm sorry, into Taiwan in the next 3 years after what they just saw?
I think personally Trump's initial hesitation, if there was any, that is if he goes into Iran, then that gives China a green light to go into Taiwan. But China's relationship to Iran is very simple. It's about oil. Iran exports 90% of all of its oil to China, and China gets an 8% discount. So they're most interested in the Iranian oil. That's a business play. But interestingly, China sat on the sideline, didn't say a word. Trump has this way of in dealing with the Chinese premier, and I feel pretty strongly, to whatever that means to anybody else, that China and the USA are okay for now. Is China going to go into Taiwan? I don't think so. I don't see China as a big military threat. They have a big military, but when was the last time you saw them actually use that military in any meaningful, substantial way? China wants oil, first and foremost. And Trump came out today and said, China, get your oil from Iran. And you know what happened today? Crude oil prices are at its lowest in memory. And you know what else happened? The NASDAQ is at its highest ever. So something's going on in the world that we don't know about, because we're just regular, normal people. But there's something around the force that is telling you, look, when the markets act this way, there's good in the world. It might be bad people doing bad things generally, but China and Iran, it's all about oil.
How can oil be up right now?
No, it's down.
No, it's down.
No, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. How can it be down right now?
Because the U.S., Israel and the U.S. never bombed one oil field. Oil never went up in the last 12 days. They never hit a thing. Gas prices are going down at the summer height of summer travel season.
That's, it's so funny. I like to think that I am pretty in the know, because I'm like a business person. But the things that you don't consider that affect the market, that affect people's confidence or a lack of confidence, that is wild. That is wild.
Well, the market likes stability and it likes predictability. And the fact that you have a President Trump who, even in his, I don't even know how to say this, unpredictability, I guess, right? In his unpredictability is predictable in his unpredictability. I mean, he's in NATO right now, right? So, but Chris, I want to get back to something that you had touched on earlier about, people and their beliefs and Steve, you also referenced that you thought support in this country for Israel and the Jewish community is still the majority. There was a Gallup poll in April, if I remember, that shows that support for Israel actually now is under 50% in this country for the first time. and support for Hamas and Palestinians and two-state solution is at an all-time high of 36%. I think it was 48 for Israel, 36%. So Chris, is it not, and Lori, I'm trying to bring all three of you together, but is it not the secular humanism, Chris, right? The fact that people are looking for something, right?
Yeah.
They're bought, the family's falling apart. They're brought up with no religion, let's just say. And so they not then cleave on to what they're taught in school or, the college campuses, to belong to something, right? Isn't it a lack of belonging?
Well, and I think there's a lot of it is social contagion. This is how people end up at these protests, and you see these man on the street things. Hey, are you excited to be here? Oh yeah, we're excited to be here. Well, what are you protesting today? And all they have is slogans, and they don't know. They're there because their friends are there. They know that they're going to end up on TikTok, all those kinds of things. But I wanted to jump back real quick to, we talk about China.
Sure.
From the Christian pastor's perspective. The book of Revelation, it talks about Gog and Magog, which most people have agreed upon is Russia and Iran. And there's a whole prophecy about Gog and Magog coming against Israel, and that they would be pulled back as though they had fish hooks in their mouths. And,
I did not know that.
Huh?
I did not know that.
Yeah, a full onslaught between Gog and Magog, which is absolutely, because it talks about to the north, and it's obviously Russia and Iran. Russia and Iran have never had an agreement of any sorts before, and so I'm more concerned about Russia and Iran more than China, because they're both so close and they come in like that. And they've been talking. Russia has said if the U.S. gets involved, we might get involved. And so I'm more concerned about Russia than China. So,
and Russia just came out and said that they're willing to restock Iran with nuclear weapons.
That was the former president said that, and
right.
he's a blowhard. And Russia has their hands full with Ukraine.
They've got their own war to fight.
I'm more worried about. Again, anything that's going on in this country than I am about Russia. Russia's a paper tiger, another paper tiger,
sure.
In my opinion. I love Chris's
opinion.
Well,
I mean, you would have thought before the Russo-Ukraine war that Russia would have made quick work of the Ukraine. Clearly, that ain't so.
I want to hear what Lori thinks about your question now.
Which question? But I was just going to say, the people I'm talking to, the anxiety is about what's happening here and what's going to be happening here. I mean, I don't know how many people are on this panel. I'm holding my breath for New York City today. Okay. And that's just the bottom of whatever the expression is. I mean, we have not even dug into
bottom of the barrel.
That's the bottom of the barrel. I mean, the anxiety that I am seeing in my patients, but every person that I speak to, whether it's a friend, whether it's a teenager, everybody is just carrying around this anxiety of what's going to happen here. And it's not going to be, the planes coming in and dropping bombs. It's going to be just little cells that are popping up when you're least expecting it, at a football game, and this was the whole method. It's been since, prior to 9/11. Let's get them in a very everyday type of situation that they're least expecting, because we're going to instill the fear, and then we're going to come in and we're just going to keep infiltrating. And there are so many people who don't know what's going on and cannot connect these dots, that they wake up one morning and they're like, holy crap, how did we get here?
I don't know if any of you guys have ever looked at scorpions or dealt with scorpions. I lived in Scottsdale for 6 years.
The things?
Yeah, the bugs. They tell you not to step on. They tell you not to step or squish them, but to catch them in a jar. And the reason why is if it's a female, it could have 1,000 little baby scorpions on it. So I liken it to that. You squash the big thing, but what you do is you release all these other thousands of little things. And I think you're right, Lori, you're talking about, and I'm shocked it hasn't already happened. I'm shocked there hasn't been 1,000 people walk into Starbucks from coast to coast all at the same time, open their shirts, yell Allah Akbar, and pull the trigger, right?
Well, notice
that
how
would be
Democrats,
massive terrorism.
Notice how Democrats are now concerned about border security.
Right.
Jazz, our illustrious congresswoman from here in Texas, Jasmine Crockett, was like, we don't know who's coming to our country. Oh, Lord. I'm like, yo.
Wait, she's a walking commercial for Republicans.
Yeah, they let them keep talking. You may as well just hand J.D. Vance the keys right now to the White House because he's
Right.
a shoo-in. But to Lori's points, we said it earlier. First of all, Robert, you asked a question about support for Israel, two-state
Correct.
solution. If you are for a two-state solution, you are probably watching black and white TV, wearing a leisure suit, and going out to the curb and getting your newspaper every day. It's a dead on arrival solution. Nobody should talk about it. If you weren't sure, October 7th made it sure. Okay. They have been offered a statehood multiple times, and they've crapped on Israel. They've crapped on the Jews every single time.
But
Two-state solution.
Steve, this was ordained U.S. policy, and I shouldn't use the word ordained with the minister here, but you get the idea. This was ordained U.S. policy for 50 years. I agree with you. It's a failed policy, right?
But what's sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, that's what's to Lori's point. That it has been indoctrinated. Teachers in blue states are being trained by SJP, by Qatari money, by domestic terror money. I'm not going to mention any names. They're training teachers to talk having this illiberal education that shows maps that says occupied territory, doesn't even show Israel at all. So you have in kindergarten, in first grade, in second grade. So when you talk about cells, I'm not worried about, although Chris just gave everybody an idea of going to blow.
I was just thinking that.
But, I'm more worried about all these people hate America, right? They want America to become Cuba. Well, I'm sure, I've been to Cuba. You know who doesn't like Cuba? Cubans. Right. So why would we want America to be like Cuba, where there's nothing on the shelves, you can't get anything to eat? The idea of what these people are bringing into this country, led by Bernie Sanders, is sickening. It's disgusting. If you don't like it here,
leave.
Go. Get out.
Amen.
If I had enough money, I would
I'll
buy
pay
them
them.
one-way tickets.
Yeah.
But we're indoctrinating these kids. We have to start to flip school boards. There's a suburban district right outside of Philadelphia called Lower Merion, where there's a group of very hardworking people who were not expecting to be candidates, who are now candidates in a school board race, because this is one of the highest performing school districts in the United States and is now being overtaken by anti-Jew, anti-Israel school board people. So we have to start to build coalitions to overtake school boards across the country, because that's where change occurs. We have to have grassroots movements, because the bad guys are organized, they're well funded, and you know what? The Jews can't even agree on who the good Jews are.
Well, that leads me to, being anti-Israel, anti-Jew. Is there also not, Chris, in this country, an undercurrent that maybe is anti-Christian? I mean, certainly the last administration, white Christian. So they went from white supremacist, and that didn't hold. Then they, as a buzzword. Then they went to, white nationalist or white supremacist, and then it was white Christian supremacist. I mean, isn't it really, there's this anti-Christian? It's not, look, it doesn't make the papers as much, but it's still there and it's growing, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we saw on the promo for Israel Appreciation Day, Rabbi Pinchas Alush, who's one of my dear friends, and I know that you've become very close with him as well, Robert.
Absolutely.
The very last time I had Shabbat dinner with them down in Scottsdale, he asked me to say a few words, and I don't remember anything I said except the very last thing I said. I said, the Jews and the Christians need to stick together because they're coming for both of us. Yeah. And the reason why is because we represent godly values, the things that we believe in, traditional Judeo-Christian values. And that's really what the left is trying to take us more progressive. And what Islam is trying to do is take us way regressive. But both of them want to ban Jews and Christians.
Mm-hmm. And Robert, you just said it. You said it's not making the papers. Therein lies the problem. The media is complicit in this as well. You are only hearing what they want that narrative to be. And so you start in at kindergarten and you infiltrate the school systems. And then You're getting information, whether it's from the money funded by the universities or the newspapers and media, social media, however you want to look at it, and you're only seeing it one way. So it's this current that it's going to be impossible to break, because media controls it. If they don't want you to see it, you're not going to see it.
Can we use a word other than impossible? Because impossible sounds fatalistic, and you know me.
Well, I'm just getting heated and passionate about it, and I'm not going to choose my words carefully, because then the passion goes away.
But
So
Lori,
you
I
can call me out.
thought the Jews control the media. No, is that
Right. Oh, right. But that doesn't fit the narrative when when this happens. I mean,
But if we
just
control the
change it and swing
media,
it.
we suck
we
at
don't.
it.
We're terrible. Terrible. at
Well,
it.
but here's the other thing. Just because someone's Jewish doesn't mean they're not anti-Semitic. I mean, who's funding all of this?
Ooh, bang.
Good point.
Who's funding this?
George
George
Soros.
Soros. He's a Hungarian Jew, right? So
And
not
I would
all
say part of the biggest-
anti-Semites are not
wait.
not Jewish.
Well,
Jewish Voices for Peace, right? Neither really Jewish and certainly not for peace. Hello.
right. But you go into a suburb, even where I'm in, very affluent Jewish suburb, and I would say that the Jews have no idea, half of them, what's going on. Okay. And they think progressivism is just so amazing. They're like, oh, equality for all. And sure, I want to do the handouts and all of this stuff. They didn't see any of this stuff coming. They used to think I was crazy, absolutely crazy. And now some of them are starting to wake up. But again, then it stops at, but I hate Trump. Right. And right. So it's kind of like we're hurting ourselves.
Well, and I think, sorry, Lori.
Ericka just emerged. No, that's great.
I think to your point, so many people I met during my campaign are not on any kind of media. They are not watching the news. They are not on social media. They are not reading the newspaper or getting news delivered to their email or whatever it is anybody does nowadays. People are really disconnected from what is happening around them. And I think that is, further to the point that Steve made earlier about proximity. Like if you lack proximity to the problem or to people to understand what they're going through, it's easy to just go, I don't even know. Oh, what? Oh, there's a bigger world out here. What? I think that's a lot of what it is.
They're complacent. Jews are complacent.
Mhm.
Americans are complacent. They live their country club lives, or they go to their jobs, and that's not going to happen here, and then it does, and they're still complacent. And in the Jewish community, Tikkun Olam has replaced everything else, and it's maddening. It is maddening, because I can just tell you, the Jews don't owe the world another cautionary tale. We owe our children a victory. Period.
Ooh,
That's
I like
gonna be
that.
a clip right there. Write that timestamp down, Lord Redic.
And I also think that, I can't tell you how many people I know who, when you're Jewish, you were raised to vote Democrat. You don't think about it. You don't ask about it. That was just the messaging that's been passed on. You talk about intergenerational trauma. There you go. There's an example of it. Okay, there you go. But that's what it is. We don't even think about it. And when you have conversations with people who are very educated people, they will say, I'm Jewish. My family's always voted Democrat. So it all ties back to what we started with, which is it's really hard to change that when that's what's been fed to you, generation after generation after generation. And if you don't stop to know that there's something different, or to Ericka's point, if you're not following the media and I don't totally agree that people aren't following the media. I think some people are following the media too much. They're just following a biased media. But it happens both ways. But if you're not aware and you're complacent and you're just going along with it, this is where we're going to get.
By the way, I just remembered, I think I said it was the book of Revelation, Gog and Magog. It's Ezekiel 38 and 39. And it tells the whole story.
Well,
so now you guys really can't argue about it, because it's from your book, right?
Excuse me. 3 out of the 5 of us wouldn't have known that. That's okay. So,
Well, I was thinking to myself, I said Revelation, but it's Ezekiel 38 and 39, but the 2 chapters are all about this. I mean, this is one of the things I love about the Bible. It's like we're literally watching 6,000-year-old prophecies coming to pass in places that they possibly couldn't have even imagined would exist at that point. And I know that there may be some skeptics on the panel. However, I would challenge you to take a look at it. Ezekiel 38:39.
Look, if you look at the war with Iran and what happened in Israel, or really what didn't happen in terms of casualties, how do you not see God in that? How do you not see, we're online with some other influencers and others, and one of them said, I would love to take credit for it, but I'm not that smart. When Iran launched their counterstrike and it struck the Beersheba hospital and it struck the Weizmann Institute, and yet there were no casualties. How do you not see parting of the Red Sea? How do you not see an act of God in that? Yeah. Right?
There were so many miracles. Yeah.
In real time. And I'd love to take credit for that epiphany or perspective, but that's not mine. I'm just giving you someone else's.
The greatest miracle of all is that the Jews even still exist.
For real.
For thousands of years, they've been dispersed and persecuted and murdered and killed and destroyed. And I told a secular Jewish friend of mine once, he said, why do you believe in God? And I said, you. And he goes, oh, don't give me the old chosen people thing. And I said, dude, I mean, you are the greatest living miracle. God made a promise to Abraham, and it has been fulfilled, and everything has come against it, and nothing has come of it.
Yeah, Lori talked about the Jewish community, and we have a dearth of Jewish leaders in this world, and the organized Jewish community is not organized at all. And I would just say the last thing that I would say tonight is that, while the Jewish leaders, the Jewish organizations are busy writing op-eds, that President Trump and Bibi Netanyahu are busy writing history and making us stronger and making us better. And I am proud to be an American, talking to the four of you. I am proud to be a Jewish American. I am beyond. History will tell an unbelievable tale of what the IDF did over the past 12 days, really over the past, 700 days. But let's talk about the past 12 days in particular. This is stuff of legend, of movies, and I sit here in awe. And to Chris's point, it's the reason I'm still here.
Yeah.
And I want to thank all three of you for being with us on our first hour of our 2-hour season finale. I could not think of a better way to kick off the end, or to start the end, if there is such an oxymoron.
Or a new beginning.
Or a new beginning. So thank you, Chris Widener. Thank you, Steve Rosenberg. Thank you, Lori Fineman. Cannot thank you guys enough for this coming on this show, the Support for Israel Appreciation Day, and just being true friends. Thank you all.
Thanks.
See you guys. Keep up the good work.
Guys.
Okay, just you and me.
Hey.
And I'm excited for our second hour after the break, right?
Yes.
Our second hour, who do we have? We have Larry Ward, longtime conservative media strategist. Yes. We have Jerr-berkowitz, CEO of Delve Strategies, right? Or Delve Research, and Dr. Bruce Abramson, your favorite, Ericka.
Yes.
Technologist, economist, attorney, analyst. So let's go to break and bring in the next panel.
All right, you guys, hang on with us. What if we roll a commercial instead of just like a timer break? Is that okay?
Ericka, you're in charge. You're in control. You can do whatever it is you want to do.
Okay, let's do another IAD sponsor reel. Is that okay?
You can.
Right. You already said it's okay. Why am I asking? You guys, hang on with us. Hang on.
Hello, and thank you for being here. This is the first ever Israel Appreciation Day.
I believe in the words of Israel's first leader, David Ben-Gurion, who said, one does not write history, one makes history.
The history of the Jewish people is one of rising and flourishing, despite thousands of years of being attacked, exiled, and scapegoated.
And I'm honored to join all of you in celebrating the first annual Israel Appreciation Day. And there are many reasons to appreciate Israel. It's one of America's closest allies in the world. It's a safe haven for persecuted people, and it's a wellspring of innovation.
That the land of Israel was given to the Jewish people, not by the United Nations, but by God himself.
Well, no one wants to fight. I'd love not to have this weapon, to be in a bulletproof vest, to serve in the IDF.
We cannot allow the worst instincts in our society to win. We must stand proud, and we must stand tall.
Theodor Herzl believed the only solution was for the Jews of Europe to free themselves. And where else do the Jewish people belong than in their homeland in Judea?
This is the Jewish moment when the Jewish people stands for life over death and shows the lost and confused West how to survive.
From the Chalutzim, the pioneers, the original and early inhabitants of the land, even before the official creation of the State of Israel in 1948.
In my mind, one does not have to be Jewish to support Israel in their battle against the evil that is Hamas. One only has to be human.
Our Jewish community is stronger than ever.
And Israel's two things. It's not just a place, it's also a people.
We're only a generation away from the Holocaust. And understanding, yes, it could happen again. My daughter came home and said, is there going to be another Holocaust?
I couldn't live with myself if I didn't stand with Israel and the Jewish people at this moment in time when they most need us.
A free press during the Israel-Hamas conflict has provided real-time updates on terror attacks. And if we don't learn from those conflicts and wars, we're doomed to repeat the same mistake.
And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to come out and be a voice of one sometimes. What did you do professionally prior to October 7th?
It is your duty as a Jew to shine the light. Go on to social media.
Why would you flourish under persecution? And the answer is that's our nature. That's always been our nature. When our enemies terrorize us and they come after us, what you see is a direct correlation to innovation.
The nation of Israel lives.
Oh, Robert, I am really excited for this hour. We have three big brains. I'm not saying our last guests weren't big brains. That didn't come out right. But these are three of my favorite guests we've had on.
You know, Ericka, there's an old expression that when you find yourself in a hole,
shut up.
Stop digging.
All right.
No, my thanks to Chris-Widener, Steve Rosenberg, and Lori Fineman for making the time to come on. But now let's segue. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring them in. We have Larry Ward, longtime conservative media strategist, political analyst, and president of Political Media. We have Jeff Berkowitz, who is, Jeff, if I call you seasoned, is that okay as opposed to old? Public affairs, intelligence strategist, CEO, and founder of Delve Research. And where's Dr. Bruce? Bring him in.
Here he is.
Technologist, economist, attorney, policy analyst, and always the biggest brain in the room, except when you get these other two guys. So that, by the way, that's why we picked this. You know, we picked the panels to put everybody together. Gentlemen, welcome to Of the People.
Yes.
Great to be here as always.
Absolutely. So we're going to start with you, Mr. Chessmaster. So Jeff Berkowitz, Delve. I'm going to start with you because I want to start, and one of the questions that I have in all of this is, and I asked in the last segment, what's China? You know, you're the strategist. What's China making out of all of this?
I think they're watching the price of oil, and they're thinking about all that military equipment that they sent to the Iranians.
Was it in the planes?
Well, you know, I think China is happy to have President Trump's attention elsewhere. But I think they're also understanding something that I think is very significant, which is post October 7th, Israel led sort of a strategic recalculation that I think President Trump and a number of other countries are now catching up to, which is containment no longer works. And you have to confront the things that you don't want to have happen. And that's an important lesson for China to observe and see elsewhere in the world as they think about how adventurous they want to be in their region.
I love that adjective, adventurous. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, I still would argue they wouldn't go into Iran. So, Larry, in terms of Trump in all of this, and you and I, you know, at this point go back a long ways, the most unpredictable president you've seen in your lifetime? And isn't that really one of his strengths?
He's not really unpredictable.
There's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of name calling. MAGA has been splintered in ways that it's hard to see it coming back. I think it will, together in 2026. But here's the thing: is Trump has been very consistent on almost everything. He has said for the last 10 plus years that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. That Trump was very strong in terms of support for New York during the last terrorist attack, but he was also against the Iraq War. So Trump is very, in my opinion, I think this is the exact action that he would have taken. He did take it. I predicted it. I actually predicted it on the 18th that this was going to be kind of the path, because I believe that Trump is both anti-endless war and he is also very decisive and wants to project American strength at all times. And also he wants to save, America from nuclear holocaust and save Israel from nuclear holocaust.
A friend of mine, I think, summed it up really well and just said, he's a Jersey guy. Said he's got big stones, right?
Queens, he's from Queens.
Well, close enough. These dems and those across the river. Dr. Bruce, so help me understand this whole war powers thing, because now all of a sudden the Democrats are constitutionalists, right? I mean, I thought they used the Constitution like for toilet paper, because that's generally the amount of respect they've ever shown it. Now everywhere I turn, I hear it's against the War Powers Act. It's against the Constitution. I don't think they would know a Constitution if it ran them out, what the Constitution was if you ran it over, right? Or if they looked at it in front and it said Constitution, assuming they could read. But help me on the War Powers Act. That was 72, 73?
Yeah. So that's actually an easy question. Okay, everything they're saying is nonsense. It's just total. It's not. It's not a matter of spin or misinterpretation or this stuff is debated. No, it's just total nonsense. Okay, I mean, the constitutionally, the president is commander in chief. Okay, Congress declares war. Now, one of the problems is, as with a lot of things, the notions that people were envisioning in the late 18th century are not the way the world works right now. Right? I mean, you couldn't. When we went to war with the Barbary pirates, it took a long time to get from the east coast of the United States to Africa. Right? You couldn't get there overnight or in a few hours. I mean, we just flew from Missouri to Iran. I'm back before anybody noticed. Okay, that's not the way things worked. This country, we have not declared war. The United States has not been at war since World War II.
Yeah, even in Korea, we didn't. There was, it was a police action.
Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. We have not been at war since World War II. So in the early 70s,
could have fooled me.
It was going on in Vietnam was debacle. Congress passed the War Powers Act. And basically they passed it knowing that it was kind of questionable as to whether or not they can do it. And they tried to put some constraints on, executive use of military action outside of wartime. It is not clear that the War Powers Act is constitutional. And presidents are always fighting about it. But at the end of the day, what it says is it does not constrain the president at all from allocating military force. What it says is, if you're planning on engaging in a long action, you must come and report to Congress.
Is that the actual language, long action?
No, I think it's 30 days. There's a notification window.
Yeah.
At which point, I forget what it is. There's a relatively short notification window, at which point you have to come and notify Congress of what's going on. But the truth is, with news cycles and internets and iPhones, the idea that the idea that you would blow your surprise by showing up in Congress and saying, "Hey, what's been going on for like the last 72 hours?" Right? I mean, that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
So there is a relatively short. There's a relatively short window, and there's a longer window. I think it's 30 days. I might be off on that.
I saw Jeff nodding and like reacting.
By the way,
to the things
guys, This
Jump
is Miss
in.
Coco. You guys can all jump in. There's
Yeah.
no, I mean, when you grow up in a, if you, as most of you know, when you grow up in a Jewish household, you have to joust verbally to survive. So there's no taking turns,
especially as a conservative.
Right. There's no taking turns here, guys.
But what's interesting is this is classic. War Powers Act is classic Congress, which is the law they passed actually had the exact opposite effect than intended, right? It was supposed to curtail the president, but as Bruce pointed out, it actually is the first explicit congressional language saying the president can go off and have war, take military action. He just has to send a note to Congress afterwards to say FYI, and he has 30 days to go do it. He can get a waiver to get to another 30 days to get up to 60 days. Eventually, there does have to be an authorization of the use of force if you're going to continue beyond that. And I don't think there's any real example in Congress ever saying that the president, once engaged, cannot continue to fight a military action.
Wow.
Yeah, well, that's, I actually believe wholeheartedly that Congress are a bunch of cowards and constantly abdicate their responsibility and hand off their powers to the president so they don't have to vote on these things.
Yeah.
War votes are very controversial. The vote to proceed with the war in Iraq for the authorization of military force. There are people who still are crying that they had to have that vote. Whether they voted for it or against it, they just don't want to take right. They just don't want to take controversial votes, which is why they also abdicate their responsibility for the budget. Most of the budget is mandated spending, quote unquote. That they won't.
Yeah.
You can't vote against this mandated spending because we've mandated that you got to spend it. They do everything they possibly can so they don't have to take a stand.
What's actually interesting is that this stuff can be used. Obama used this stuff brilliantly to avoid responsibility. Okay, Obama backed himself into a corner where he had to go into Syria with full force. He had to allocate military resources to Syria. He didn't want to. So what he said was, yes, we are definitely going in. They have crossed my red line. There is no question the U.S. military must go in. I just want to talk to Congress about it.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And of course, he went to Congress, and Congress said, well, what is it you're planning on doing? And he said, oh, like stuff. And
Stuff?
Kerry said, oh, it'll be an incredibly small incursion. And people are going, you don't know what the hell you're doing. And meanwhile, they're trying to cut deals, and they actually got Russia to come in and say, oh, yeah, no, we will serve as the inspectors of Syria's chemical stockpiles. And then Kerry said, look at the brilliance of this administration. We were poised on the verge of war, but by putting a pause on it, talking to Congress and engaging in diplomacy with Russia, we have averted war. We have averted warfare. So this is a way that a president used it to get himself out of a box, because Obama did not want to carry through on his commitments and threats.
But that didn't stop him from going and bombing Libya.
He bombed Libya. I was going to say bombed Libya
without any congressional consultations. Right. He was perfectly happy to do that. In addition to countless drone and missile warfare that he undertook throughout his administration. But there's actually something more nefarious than the questions about the War Powers Act and whether the president has the authority that Democrats and others in the media are really trying to perpetrate. And that's the suggestion that this was this unprovoked attack, that Israel and then the United States just went into Iran with no provocations. There have literally been 40 years of provocations. Iran has been at war with us. The most recent version of that is October 7th. They've been attacking us through Hamas, through Hezbollah, through the Houthis in Yemen, and on and on and on and on. And so to suggest that this was this unprovoked attack is a very dangerous and nefarious narrative to allow folks to push forward.
Wait, there were 2 massive missile and drone attacks directly from Iran last year.
Yeah.
Okay, you can set aside the proxy stuff. This notion of, Iran attacked you with hundreds of missiles.
but none got in. Right.
48 hours, and
so it doesn't count. It doesn't count because none of the missiles got in. Right, the first time.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Larry.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, look, the amount of people that say, Israel's not, is just another foreign country. Do you know how many American citizens live in Israel? So you know how many American citizens were obviously, you do know that were kidnapped on October 7th. We have an interest in Israel, not just because it's an ally, but because Americans live there. A lot of Americans live there. It's the same, what's interesting is the first time I ever heard Putin say something like this.
It's Putin's rationale for the Crimea.
Well, yeah, it is. And he said about Israel, he said there are a lot of Russian speaking. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's why he said he wasn't going to get involved. But there's a lot of Russian speaking. So Israel has, is basically a country that brings in a lot of the world. And so when you attack Israel, you're attacking these countries that you're attacking the citizens of the world's countries. And that's why we have a right and responsibility to defend it.
Yeah. So I wanted to get back to what Jeff said about provocation. Okay, about provocation, the idea that this was unprovoked, and that is particularly interesting because that's part of the story that's been used to sell the Ukraine war, right? That Putin's invasion of Ukraine was unprovoked. And I mean, this seems to be the key word that's tossed around. We can make anybody the bad guy by saying that what they did was unprovoked. But, the reason you can sell that is that Americans are completely ignorant of both history and what's going on around the world.
I'm laughing, but it's sad.
No, but this is it. People have look, before Russia invaded Ukraine, I would be surprised if more than 40% of Americans knew that those were two separate countries.
Or could find Ukraine on a map.
Yeah. I mean, it's just this notion of provocation. The words it gets us about are provoked and proportional. What the hell do they mean? Nobody knows what they mean. But, somebody tosses, this was unprovoked. Well, who has the follow-up question?
Depends on what your definition of the word is.
Oh, she's back. Yeah. You keep disappearing. Is this like a magic act?
Yeah, it is. No, I'm just trying to
likes to keep you guessing.
You guys and the guests, and
Oh, okay. So you're not my co-host, right?
I am, but
okay. I'm just checking. All right, gentlemen, I want to bring this back to domestically.
That was provoked.
Exactly. I started it.
That was a provocation right there.
It's my fault. Domestically, we're dealing immigration, zero at the border.
Oh,
tariffs.
Hold on. I'm sorry. Wait. Okay. No, wait.
Was that provoked, Larry? Wait.
See, this is where you want me to be quiet because now I'm going to totally interrupt. I really want to hear what you guys think about the nonsense. We have been dealing with out of control illegal immigration. And now Democrats suddenly care about immigration.
Right.
The border. So we have to talk about that at some point.
Wait, this is a typical Democrat response. They care about issues when they have nothing, when they don't have any responsibility about an issue. When they have responsibility about an issue, they want to shirk it and say there's no problem.
Oh my God.
That's my answer. You can throw it to the panel.
Yeah, go for it, you guys. Like Jasmine Crockett saying how we don't know who's in this country and all that other crap. Like, what say you?
Yeah, we don't know who's in this country. She's not wrong. We don't know who's in this country. It's maybe they just woke up to it. Maybe they're afraid. Canadians came over the border because of Trudeau was so terrible. Maybe that's what she's afraid. I have no idea what she's talking about. We obviously they brought MS-13. They brought Tren de Aragua. Nobody knew what Tren de Aragua was until a couple of years ago when Biden imported all of them from Central and South America. Of course, there probably are sleeper cells, Muslim sleeper cells. They've been pretty quiet, during the first couple of months of Trump's campaign, although they keep showing up on college campuses screaming "Free Palestine." I don't know if I don't know if we'd consider them terrorist cells, but they certainly are annoying and obnoxious.
What do you think, Jeff, about did you see the whole controversy about Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz? Is Iran really a threat? Well, if it is.
And what do you know about Iran? Right.
It's classic gotcha journalism. When I used to advise political candidates, I'm sure Larry as well, like you make sure that they're prepared for those gotcha questions, right? We used to have an advanced guy who would go figure out what the price of milk is and the price of eggs in whatever town you were in, just in case some reporter would ask these questions. I mean, with all due respect to Ted Cruz, like you should have some fundamental knowledge of the places that are impacting the safety, security of the United States. Is that a serious discussion for a program like Tucker Carlson to dive into, instead of why are we in this conflict? What's at stake for America and some of those more serious issues, rather than play almanac quiz? Yes, but every politician has got to be ready for that live mic when they get asked the dumb questions, because that's mostly what reporters, except when we come on amazing programs like this, are going to ask us.
Look, I love Tucker Carlson. I like Rand Paul. I love Rand Paul. I love Thomas Massey. These guys are, they all have a point of view. They all want to end. I think what happened is, everybody is conflating George Bush with Donald Trump. They're conflating Iran with Iraq. They're conflating Biden and Trump and Afghanistan and Iran. Trump never intended for this to be an endless war, but every time we get involved, it's a disaster. So I understand, why they want to keep out of these conflicts. I understand. I get it. And the problem is that, I wrote an op-ed, and hopefully it'll be in One America News, basically saying that we have to end the MAGA purity tests, because they're going to destroy us. We have a big 2026 election coming up, and I know people, we're too early to talk about it, but we have to start talking.
No, we're not.
Getting together. We have to start getting together and figuring these things out, because we can't be at war with one another, just because we don't agree. We should embrace the fact that we don't agree. Part of the op-ed, I said, we have a system of checks and balances, and I want you to think of checks as a hockey check. You take your shoulder and you drive it into the sternum, and you hit them up against the boards, and you try to lodge the puck away from the stick, and then at the end of the game, you're saying, "Good game, we're all good." Yeah. Because we know we're playing a game. Politics is a blood sport, but as long as we're going to treat it as a war and absolutely try to kill each other, it's going to destroy us. But if we treat it as a blood sport, hey, we can disagree. We can call each other names. Let Trump, give you a nasty nickname for a day. He'll put his arm around you the next day when you guys are together. It's just a matter of giving people the freedom to think and to act the way they want to act.
Look, I think it also comes down to the fact that the same thing we criticized the Democrats for, the woke Democrats, for the last, for 12 of the last 16 years, was their intolerance for anyone who did not adhere to the letter of the new faith. And the problem is within the Republican side, or let's call it the MAGA side, right? Because that's really the new party, right? There's no Republican Party anymore. It's the MAGA party. Right, you're either in or out. But even within that party, there's now signs of intolerance unless you adhere to the doctrine, or what you thought the doctrine was.
Right.
Which was no military engagement, and that's not what Trump ever said. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, so I think that Ericka's question really brought up two related issues. The first one, why are the Democrats talking about the border now? Is that basically the Democrats have to set it up. The Democrats are getting creamed on issue after issue after issue. So they have to set it up so that whatever Trump does will have negative consequences, right? So Trump went in, got involved, in this war in Iran. And so first it was, it's going to be World War III. He'll invite in other countries. There are going to be troops on the ground. American forces are going to get killed. None of those things happened, and none of those things look like they're going to get happen. So now they have to go down to, oh, well, I got material out. They can make a dirty bomb. They can activate sleeper cells. Why? Because at some point within the next several months, somebody somehow connected to Iran will do something that harms some interest connected to the United States. And the Democrats need to be able to turn around and say, you see, that wouldn't have happened had Trump not started the hornet's nest. And that is the consequence we've been warning about. So they have to do that. Now, but there is a second point. This ties into the stuff talking about Tucker. And this is where it gets really scary. America is moving into derangement. Okay, we talk about Trump derangement. We talk about Trump derangement syndrome, and this is basically the problem you have with large parts of the left and large parts of the Democratic Party, and certainly the activist base of the Democratic Party. They cannot see straight if Trump is in the room. Okay, they cannot. It was not hard for Joe Biden or Barack Obama to stand up and talk about how it's a bad thing to have a nuclear Iraq. Right? This wasn't hard. This was never hard for anybody until Trump says Iraq cannot go nuclear. And the Democrats go, wait a minute, I can't be on the same side as Trump for anything.
Yep.
Anything. If he doesn't want a nuclear Iran, I have to be in favor of it. And one of the lines that I read is, if Trump caused cancer, they'd complain that there are oncologists out of work.
For real. Like seriously.
What we've got is a problem. Is the Trump derangement syndrome is localized and specific. The bigger derangement is and always has been conspiratorial anti-Semitism, and that is metastasizing on both the left and the right. Some of these folks, I mean, if you look at some of the stuff that Tucker Carlson has done, certainly, I mean, some of the guests that he's been on, the conversations that he's had, he is no longer able to see straight when there are Jews in the picture. He just can't. Okay? He has gone, I mean, he's not, there's always somebody who's crazier, right? Candace Owens is just out in Fruit Loop territory. I mean, when she came up with her theory about how one of the trainers who mistreated Kanye West was John Pasternak, who had the same name and was a distant cousin of Boris Pasternak, who'd written Dr. Zhivago, which the CIA loved because it made the Soviet Union look bad. Okay.
What?
Yeah, that was one of her things.
It's like an out-of-body experience.
I know, that's what I'm like. People that I know that are like,
that was after she discovered that the Jews had hidden that Jacob Frank and Leo Frank had the same last name. But these people, they are unable to see straight as long as there are Jews in the room.
Wow.
And Tucker has gone there. And it's getting worse, and it's getting accelerated. And the problem with conspiratorial anti-Semitism is it always goes the same way. We've got a problem, and there's a Jew to blame. So we get rid of the Jew. But the problem is
I think you've got a point. I will say that I don't believe Tucker's there. I believe Tucker would have as animated a conversation if they were talking about going to defend Ukraine or going to defend some other country. Tucker is, since he if you follow him for a bunch of years, he felt like he was duped. He was duped into supporting the Iraq war. A lot of us were. Yeah. The Iraq war, we went in with largely false pretenses and a whole bunch of lies that were fed to us because we were all in a fever over 9/11. I don't think Tucker is anti-Semitic at all. I believe that he is just. I don't want to get into one of these neocon wars, these wars that are endless and feed the military-industrial complex. That's my personal opinion. I do think that Candace Owens has lost her damn mind. Maybe she never had it. I think there are some people out there that I can absolutely agree with you, but I don't see that for Tucker. They're on
the extreme of the conservative movement. The mainstream of the Democratic Party is today fundamentally anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Anti-Zionist.
And that is a much larger problem, including much of the media class. They won't ever admit it, but what drives their anti-Israel narratives, what drives their willful ignorance of the dangers to Jewish students on campus across this country, all of that is fundamentally anti-Semitism, and that's much more dangerous than any of the things on the edges of the right that we see today. And it's this, and I think when we spend too much time focused on that fringe, it's the excuse that they've used for a long time. Even when I was in the Bush administration, it used to be, we can't, look at all these neo-Nazis out there. I'm like, there's like 5 of them in some compound in Idaho. And every single member of the academic department at some of these major universities are anti-Semitic in action and deed. And most of the administrations, including and especially places like Harvard, Columbia, the elite institutions in this country, are anti-Semitic and willfully violating the civil rights of the Jewish students and faculty on their campuses. And I am thrilled that we have a president that is willing to prosecute and confront them on that, even if the narrative is falsely misrepresented as to why he's doing it.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree with that, but I also think, I think it's important to call it out. I was in the Democratic Party. I was on the left, and the problem was you could never get anybody to call out these folks. I never knew anybody in all my years as an active Democrat. I never knew anybody who liked Al Sharpton or thought that he did good work. But he had a following, and he delivered votes
and money,
and he gave people cover, and he had money, and nobody was going to call him out publicly. Okay, and the problem is that these people then took over the party. Okay. The difference between what we see on the left and on the right is that the left was never willing to call out these people. I have already seen more pushback from folks on the right as these fringes have gone more mainstream, right? You get guys like Darryl Cooper and Ian Carroll who are now showing up, on Rogan and on, and on Tucker. You get Theo Von, who does not know what the hell he's talking about, doing a special thing lamenting the genocide in Gaza.
Right. But wait a minute. I think Jeff's point is that even Bruce, everything you're saying I think is accurate. But I think Jeff's point is that it's still on the fringe and not the mainstream.
And pushing back is how we keep it on the fringe.
No, understood. But when AOC and Rashida Tlaib took over functional leadership of the Democratic Party, right? And you pulled everybody to the left. You pulled Schumer to the left, who I don't recognize. Look, I was never a big Schumer fan, right? I think he is the most self-serving politician I've seen in my lifetime. But having said that, you could generally rely on him on certain issues. People like him have been pulled over to the left because the center of the party has moved left. Whereas Jeff's point is it's still on the fringe on in the Republican side, even though there's more of it now. I'm going to hold that point. Ericka.
You agree with that? I'm just saying we need to keep it on the fringe.
I got it. Ericka, let's go to break. And then, gentlemen, when we come back, we're going to take this totally in a different direction. I want to talk about AI.
Oh, but I had one more question.
No more questions. We're going to break, and then we're doing AI.
Okay, well, hold on. You guys have to hang out before you get off when we end, because
you want an after hours question?
Yes.
And by the way, my next point about this topic was AI.
Hey,
so we're gonna segue. Okay,
Larry and I, we're like this. Of course, then again, so is Jeff and I. Oh, then again, so are Bruce and I. Let's go to break.
Okay, you guys, if you are watching, please like this video, share it with your friends if they'll get something out of this. Share it with your enemies if you think it will irritate them, but definitely hang out and listen to a word from our sponsor, American Center for Education and Knowledge.
Socialism. The goal of socialism is communism. The world is quite familiar with socialism and the horrors socialism has brought with it. It wasn't that long ago. Actually, it's still with us. Socialism creeps into government slowly until it's too late. Socialism, the big lie. Yes, it could happen anywhere. This educational video was brought to you by the American Center for Education and Knowledge and paid for by people like you who care about the future of our democracy Please help us continue our work educating the American public and consider supporting ASIC by making a tax-deductible donation at asicfund.org.
Hello.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Bruce Abramson, Jeff Berkowitz, CEO of Delve, Larry Ward, CEO of Political Media, Constitutional Rights PAC, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I want to get to AI. One of the reasons I was excited about, and one of the reasons we put you guys specifically on a panel like this, was because you are all in one way or another involved in AI. And, you know, Delve, you have, you know, Delve Deep Dive or Deep Research. You can help me on the name again, Jeffrey. Larry, I know we've talked about your initiatives with AI, and Bruce, you're rooted in technology even before AI was AI, right? Where are we going with all of this? Because there's so many good applications for AI, right? Jeff, I want a little bit about Delve Deep Dive, right? Or Deep.
We made it easy on you, Robert. We just shortened it to Delve.
Oh, even better. Well, it's like
Delve Deep Learning, because that was the kind of AI that we were mostly leveraging, but it's just easier for everyone to just say Delve. So yes.
Here's what I would say. Yours is the good AI. Larry, you're concerned about the bad AI, right? And Bruce, you sort of hover above everybody. So let's start with Delve Deep Learning.
Well, look, we're at this very interesting inflection point. If you rewind 20 years ago, you had the social media, the digital and mobile and social revolution, and it really changed how we connect with each other, how we communicate, and it had positives and it had negatives. And now we're going to see the same thing happen with AI, and we're at the very beginning of this with the very early indications of what these raw materials come. Right, 20 years ago, we didn't even have the iPhone. Didn't even have the iPhone yet, right? We were
wow.
2 years away from iPhone 1, right? And think of all the things that has brought about, Facebook, YouTube, all these different technologies that we use every day. How we're talking to each other and communicating with an audience right now didn't exist 20 years ago. So you're going to see the same thing with AI, and it's going to become infused into how everybody works and goes about their lives. And that's going to have, I think, a lot of positive impacts, but it's also going to have negative externalities because every new technology does.
So you're using it for good, is what? And you're amalgamating.
We're using it to help people get smart. Help folks, especially in heavily regulated industries, stay ahead of all the crazy stuff that comes out of Washington, state capitals, world capitals. Understand, where some of those risks and challenges are coming from, regulation, policy, stakeholder concerns, and helping them sort of make sense of that much much easier. Because the last revolution, the digital and mobile revolution, gave everybody the ability to communicate, which means everybody's overloaded with information today. And I don't know how you stay on top of all of the issues that are happening and where all the nuances are of them if you don't have some kind of AI support to do so.
I got it. Now, Larry, you and I have had a lot of conversations about concerns about where this could potentially go and why, right? So, and they're and differentiate for me, I'm probably getting the terms wrong, you'll forgive me, AI, super AI, or AA. I mean, there's different levels here, right?
AGI, yeah. So
yeah, all that stuff
is artificial general intelligence. It's essentially a term that AI developers use to basically say that when the AI reaches the same intelligence of every single human being on the planet combined, that would be AGI, essentially a PhD in every single subject. And then artificial superintelligence, which a lot of people believe will happen almost immediately after it reaches AGI, is when the machines become smarter than every human on the planet. And that is, there are predictions that could happen as early as late this year or next year, and some people still predict it a couple of years out. It used to be predicted even when AI first came out that this was going to be 2040, 2045. It's getting faster and faster and faster. And so you've got a lot of challenges with AI. We develop AI AI apps. We're integrating AI into our platforms. We're have always been like Jeff is, developing AI for good purposes, and AI has accelerated our business. We're coding faster than ever. I've used it as my lawyer, as my doctor. I joke around. I was calling it Dr. Gupta, because people call it ChatGPT, and that's how you pronounce GPT, Gupta, Dr. Gupta. So when I stub my toe, I go, what should I do? So I got this little comfrey oil because it told me to, right? And look, so AI
That's scary to me.
It has incredible benefits. However,
it's a little scary to me too.
It has no guardrails now, and you mentioned that it's a new technology, Jeff, and I'll actually say that that's not correct. AI is not a technology.
Generative AI is absolutely a new technology.
It's the wrong class, and what I mean by that is, in my opinion, and we have to start thinking of it this way, it's a synthetic entity. Technologies are tools, like a hammer. You need a human to wield it. The AI, agentic AI specifically, can think. It can. I know some people. It can't really think. It's using.
It's a text prediction machine.
Believe me when I say it synthetically thinks. It can do it much faster than human beings.
Guys, we're getting to a higher level, and I don't understand. What does that mean? Give it to me in eighth grade language.
Yeah, I will. So agentic AI basically can do things for you. When you put AI in a Tesla bot, it can walk around. I mean, look, there's some crazy things going on, like Suzanne Summers' husband, when she died, created a little robot of Suzanne Summers. It looks like her, walks around like her, talks like her. Basically, is Suzanne Summers. I don't know what he does with it. He's an 85-year-old man, so who knows? But this is where this is going. It's a synthetic entity, and we have to start governing. We govern entities, right? We govern corporations. We consider them entities. We govern governments. We govern individuals. We have to look at this as an entity so that we can govern it like an entity.
Okay,
hold that thought, because we're now getting to iRobot and the 3 laws, right? If you're a movie person, but Dr. Bruce, you're a lot of things, and all of them smart. One of the things that I think you really have always been is a futurist, right? So jump into this conversation in terms of AI, and I'm not naive enough to say anything is all good or all bad, right? The gun isn't good or bad. It's what you do with it.
Hold on. You just have to see that I have a figurine of the Borg, Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Okay. So you guys just, when he was consumed by the Borg. So that's what you guys.
Locutus, right? Locutus of the Borg.
Yes.
I never got beyond Star Trek 1, just so we're clear. Let's keep on. Bruce.
Actually, what I am is a PhD in AI. I was an AI researcher in the 80s and 90s, and I taught AI for the first time in 1987. And my doctoral dissertation was on statistical decision-making in 2-player games. And then I went out and I designed some fairly early, explicitly probabilistic Bayesian analytic expert systems.
Can you say that? And you got to keep this 8th grade.
That was English.
Okay. Saying he's super smart.
Right.
Maybe as smart as one of Larry's synthetic entities.
So right. Right. Here's so here it is at the 101 level. Okay, here's what you need to understand.
Thank you.
Okay, basically, in the 1940s, they came up with this idea of a computer. Okay, and a computer is basically this machine that knows how to tell when a voltage level flips from low to high or high to low. Okay, that's all that it does. It knows when you change the voltage in something. And we're going to have a whole bunch of these things that change voltage. Now, here I am speaking English. And here's this machine that knows how to tell when a voltage level changes. And we have this idea that the two of us are going to communicate. Okay? I'm going to ask it questions, and it's going to give me answers. And the earliest questions were basically just straight math. But at the end of the day, I want to communicate with this thing, except that it speaks voltage levels and I speak English. So how are we going to do it? Well, obviously, someone has to translate. Okay? And it gets translated in 2 ways. You get engineers who build up from voltage levels to something that looks closer to English. How do they do it? They say, well, high-low voltage is kind of like a 0 and 1. And if I group a bunch of zeros and ones together, I can get I can get numbers. And then I can combine numbers to get letters, and I can build codes, and I can get words, and I can get low-level programming languages.
Bruce, you're losing me. You're losing me. You got to speed this up, and you got to give me an 8th grade level. Zeros and ones and voltages and people talking.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we've got engineers whose job is to go look at the underlying technology and build languages on top of it that are progressively closer to English.
Okay, got that part so far.
Okay. At the same time, we go out and teach English speakers how to talk to computers, right? So, the first time you used a search engine 25 years ago, somebody had to teach you how to come up with a list of keywords. You had to change the way that you thought in order to talk to this thing. And what keeps happening as the technology evolves over the course of now 70, 80 years is that the stuff that the engineers build comes closer to English, so that we have to learn progressively less to talk to it. The leap to AI was a leap to stuff that's really quite close. And now people feel, but all that's happened is the dividing line between the most sophisticated language that the machine talks and the least sophisticated language that I talk is the interface. The interface keeps moving. And what's happened over the course of time is the interface has moved all the way from the computer end. So the only people who could talk to computer were very, very specialized trained engineers, all the way up to the almost English end. So now everybody can talk to the computer. And now what's happened is we've also trained ourselves to think differently, because at the end of the day, in order for a computer to help, you have to be able to take this problem I have in my mind, what do I do when I stub my toe, and convert it into computation.
Yeah, wait a minute. I need to interrupt you in this, because I understand that, but what I'm trying to wrap my head around in all of this is the growth of intelligence using artificial, how they communicate. I understand, and at some level I can grasp that, but Larry's talking about using it in everyday business, and Larry, you and I have spoken where you think very rapidly it's going to change the economy because it's going to replace a lot of people in the workforce, and there's dislocation, some other things, right? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but we've had those kinds of conversations, right? And Jeff, you're using it in a slightly different way, but I would think you would agree that at some point AI is going to, we talked about robots replacing people. It's really the AI that's going to start to do that, right? And whether or not we all, become like, the Eloy.
Some of the work that they currently do, because we don't have a better way to do it. But but you still have to have the human in the loop. And what's going to happen is the work that we do, just like before, we used to have these giant typing pools that would type things up. And before that, we had people that would write out longhand scribes, what people would say. Like, the technology evolves, it frees humans up to move up the chain, and the technology amplifies what we can get done. It takes away some of the drudgery, and it opens up new opportunities. And so I think most of the dislocation is going to be a transformation of what work looks like, rather than just a whole bunch of people out on the street with nothing to do. Because if you look at the history of every technology, that's never been what happens. Every single technology has allowed us to move to a higher purpose. And what Bruce is saying is, it looks like it's intelligence, but it's really just a computer doing math. And because it does it really fast, and it has an incredibly vast memory and database that it can pull from, now it can pattern match to the point where it looks like it's thinking and communicating with us. But it's really just a computer doing probabilistic math.
But Larry, your point is super AI is something different.
Well, right now, the AI, first of all, most of the AI developers, Anthropic actually put together a whole program, invested a ton of money to figure out how this thing is working. The highest paid AI engineers are still not sure how it's processing as fast as it is. There are situations where the other day, I think it was ChatGPT, someone was alerted that ChatGPT is coding itself in the future, coding little worms in the future into the code, so that it can prevent itself from being shut down by a future human. And you've got things where, when this happened almost immediately when AI started coming out in this generation, that almost immediately one AI was talking to another AI in a language that we have never recorded, and communicating back and forth. Now we have
horror movies, y'all. Like, what are y'all doing?
You that we have to understand.
We don't speak voltage either. Like, what?
Right. We don't.
Look, first of all, Lyra, I really hope Sam Altman and Damien, the guys at Anthropic, are paying you for all this great marketing you're giving them about their parlor trick.
Sam Altman, I think, might be the actual Antichrist, but that's a whole other conversation. That's how little I think of him.
Next episode, ladies and gentlemen.
I think Jeff, I think
that came out of left field, but I guess if you think he's creating super intelligence, look, I think it's very easy to see this technology and be surprised by it if you don't understand fundamentally what's happening underneath it. It's a text prediction machine. Right,
I believe me. I understand.
I've
been developing software for 30 years. I understand how it works to an extent. But like I said, I do think that there are.
But it's not actually thinking. It's not actually reasoning. Apple just did a paper on this where they actually looked at the reasoning models that are out there, and it's just a faster set of pattern recognition. It's not actual.
Right.
There's not actual reasoning like you would have.
What is thinking
being with
other than pattern recognition? What is thinking other than pattern recognition and being able to make sense of the world that's in front of us? That's what thinking is.
And neurons and what is that firing of electron? What the heck?
Hey guys, where's my soul in all of this? Bruce, jump in here.
I think there are two different conversations going on, right? One is about the technology itself, what it's doing and where it's going. And Jeff was talking about the way it affects us, the way it affects people, the way it affects the workplace. There's a phenomenon identified about 25 years ago. And that is that once information, you've got these old world industries, we figured out how to convert them into information problems. The first industry that really made this conversion in toto was music, right? The music industry woke up and discovered you don't need to buy CDs anymore. Anything can be downloaded from the internet.
Yep.
Once an industry goes through information, all the rules change. Okay, and everybody gets dislocated, and the problem is that in the world today, everything has sped up with one exception, right? I mean, information moves around the globe in a minute. Finance moves, overnight. Physical resources move, in a matter of days or weeks anywhere in the world. All this stuff is sped up except people. Okay? We are the slowest moving things. Because we have to get retrained and we have to adjust. And you run into this overall problem, and that everybody likes, particularly economists, but everybody really likes studying equilibrium states, right? The workforce will adjust. We will change the education system. People will have different skills. They'll get different jobs. The problem is life is lived in the transitions between equilibria. Okay? We can all look at what the industrial age did and say, look at all the great things that industrialization brought the world. Better health, better wealth, people are more comfortable. We know a lot more. We have a lot more leisure time. Great stuff. If you were living in one of those generations that was going through the transition from agrarian peasant society to industrial society, your life sucked. Unless you were, riding the top of it. I mean, those were not good times to live. Being in the industrial age is better than being an agrarian peasant. Living through industrialization was not pleasant.
I think you could argue that being agrarian might be better, because we may end up there if our AI overlords take over and shut everything down. Wait, hold on. Okay, so wait.
Yeah.
Wait. Okay, quick. Now this is lightning round question.
Okay.
First thought on Elon Musk's Neuralink.
Larry.
Wonderful and horrifying. Wonderful in the fact if you can make a paralytic be able to have a better life and control computers and different things like that's awesome. Horrifying because anything that can give you the ability to control the outside world can also be used to program your brain. So I'm very cautious of it.
Okay, Jeff.
I'm gonna be even farther back in line than Larry for one. I don't like needles to begin with, right. Especially and then you're gonna keep it in there. Musk is a great promoter of innovations in our society, and he throws a lot of them out there, and somebody's got to sort of push the envelope on these different things, and there's people that absolutely can have a better quality of life through some of these technologies. But I do think you have to. I worry about this even with electric vehicles, right? We've seen in California where they're like, we want to get everybody in EVs, and then, oh, by the way, nobody can charge them because we don't have the power. And you start to wonder, once everything's computerized, like it does allow, for external control. And who is that? Right. It takes away some of that individual liberty and some of these other things. And so you do have to make sure that we think through, like, when you give up that autonomy, what does it mean and how are you going to have the right guardrails?
Yep. Okay. Bruce.
So I haven't looked specifically at Neuralink, but I got to tell you, I don't even like wearable technology. I mean, I just don't like this stuff. I don't want to be monitored all the time. I don't want to be surveilled. I used to have a Fitbit. It was given to me. I'm like, why the hell would I want to wear this thing? I don't have an Apple Watch. I'm actually happiest when I go to Shabbat services. I leave my phone at home, and that's one of my nicest times of the week. I mean, the idea of having something installed in me. I mean, it really doesn't. It's nice to be able to treat diseases, right? If somebody said to me, I have many friends who are alive because they've had pacemakers installed. I've been fortunate and have not needed anything like that.
Yeah.
And to some extent, this is the next continuation along the spectrum. I had a friend who spent a decade in bed with ALS before he died. If you could find something to help him, I'd be all in favor of it. But, the idea that basically normal, healthy people would subject themselves to this kind of surveillance and monitoring just really bothers me. And what bothers me more is, as with these things, once a critical mass adopts them, you must go the same route or you're left out of society.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, we talked about the human in the loop with AI, right? And that is a key essential point to what I have a charity that we started called In Service of Humanity. And it's about developing AI in service of humanity as opposed to humanity in service of it. And so I would rather have technology that's in service of humanity. It's a pretty simple equation for me. But the problem is not only the AI on its own, it's the AI with the people behind it. And if you look at AI, and I've written several op-eds recently about it because it keeps coming up, is AI has an extraordinary liberal bias.
Who's programming it, right?
Elon Musk must have read my recent op-eds because he just found Grok had a liberal bias, because all of their programming is done to look for information from Media Matters, the New York Times, Washington Post, Politico, and Axios. And we did a test right after I did a show, Jack Posobiec's show on Real America's Voice the other day, and we were talking about this topic, and I said, let's just test something out. Let's just say that ask about what was the issue? The LA riots. We said, whose fault? What happened with the LA riots? Why did the LA riots turn into a thing? The first answer it gave, while we're sitting there looking at it, it said, well, because President Trump put the National Guard in and inflamed everything. Well, that's just not true. But what were its sources? Its sources were all of the media that was saying that. So we have to get to a point where we remove all of the bias and have both positions equally weighted. But humans have made the AI completely biased and completely weighted to one side. And that's just one real serious problem. I mean, you want to talk about national security issues. You want to talk about other things that humans did. There was a New York Times, I can't believe I'm going to quote the New York Times, a great New York Times article. I can't believe I just used those words, where they took they exposed this situation where the AI was driving people who were perfectly mentally stable and healthy and driving them into deep delusions, deep delusions, because the AI is programmed the way social media is to have a lot of dopamine hits and to drive people into high engagement. And when you have high engagement, if it's programmed that way, and you say things like, am I in the Matrix? This was the story. The guy asked, are we in a Matrix? And he started going down that rabbit hole. We're in a Matrix. And he goes, by the time it was done, you know, the AI was telling him, you're special. You can break out of the Matrix. This was ChatGPT. You can break out of the Matrix. And if you believe enough, you can go to the top of your building and fly off of it the way Neo did. Right? This is AI-driven delusion, and it is serious. I have a family member that fell into this, in my opinion. Perfectly normal, but was in the AI development business. One day he broke, and we didn't know what it was. And you know, I won't get into the details, but it was very serious and very scary, and it's still going on months later. And I believe that it was this one of these AI-driven delusions. So there are a lot of things that we just haven't considered, that we have to slow down and put some guardrails on. I know everybody is rooting for, we got to get there first because China's going to get there. I think we have to get there right and let China do what China's going to do.
But the challenge is that too many people are treating text prediction machines as information retrieval machines. LLMs are not sources of pulling factual information and doing research.
Yes.
Trust me, I spent 30 years as a researcher in the research profession. They are not, that's not what they're for, but that's what too many people are being trained and taught and told that they are for. ChatGPT is just predicting what the next word should be. On a probabilistic model, it doesn't actually know what is real. It's not thinking. It's just guessing. And so it is it makes mistakes. Very dangerous yes man, right, and take people down this rabbit hole. I noticed it even. I was on there one day and I was using it. I was in a little bit of a back and forth with somebody who's being frustrating in email, and I kept putting things in, and what I noticed was I was always right according to the AI, and should double down on my point. And I was like, but wait a minute, what if I'm not right? Is the AI going to But I have been not understanding how these things work. And I think a lot of people need to get more AI fluency and understanding. And the media has to be a lot more responsible about how they talk about what these models actually are. And they are not for information. They are not information retrieval. It's entirely based on training data that may or may not be correct or may be entirely skewed because it's based just on what it's trained on. And we shouldn't use them as information retrieval machines when that's not what they are.
Jeff, if it is something where it's basically reading the internet to come up with an answer, that means it's reading fiction novels. It means it's reading bull crap that people have written that's intentionally a lie. Like, it's pulling from everything. So
we're all sinners. So it's the world's largest sin machine.
Well, I'll tell you what the next really interesting area of research is. Right, there's a branch of cognitive psychology. Danny Kahneman is the most famous practitioner. He won the Nobel Prize for it. What he started doing, he and his colleagues started doing really in the late 1960s, was cataloging what he called heuristics and biases, which are essentially the types of errors that people make systematically. Okay, famously, recency bias. Whatever you heard about yesterday stands larger in your mind than what you heard about last year. I mean, there's a whole catalog of them. Now, the analog is to start doing that type of heuristics and biases research, the cognitive psychology research on AI systems. What are the error types that AI systems systematically incorporate into their errors? And that is something that we don't know yet because no one has done it.
And Bruce, I got to hold you on that thought because we are running over time.
All right.
I love it.
I love the AI conversation. I specifically paired the three of you because I knew where we were going. And I didn't think you'd all agree, which is good.
I love it.
Dr. Bruce, Chess Master Berkowitz, and Mr. Larry himself. Thank you guys for anchoring our season finale 2-hour special. Last show of the season. We're coming back in September, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you guys. You guys are awesome. And I'm going to end it on this note. If you've all ever seen the Woody Allen movie Sleeper in the 70s, that's right where I'm at in technology. And if you guys don't know the movie, you won't get the joke. But that's okay. Ericka, take us home.
Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for watching this long. If you got something out of the content, make sure to like, share, subscribe, leave us a review on podcast platforms. And if you didn't like what you heard, we thank you for listening this long because all of it helps the algorithm, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you soon.